She walked into the luxury dealership wearing worn shoes and a second-hand shawl. The staff barely looked up. One smirked, the other laughed, just another poor old woman wasting their time. They didn't know she wasn't here for herself, but for someone far more powerful. The next day, their laughter turned to silence when a black Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up, and a billionaire stepped out, her son. What followed left the entire showroom stunned. This isn't just a story about a car. It's about respect, judgment, and a mother's quiet dignity that shook an entire room. Margaret adjusted the wool shawl around her shoulders as she stepped off the city bus and looked across the wide boulevard. Her eyes landed on the dealership, floor-to-ceiling glass, polished metal signage, and cars gleaming like diamonds under showroom lights. It was the kind of place most people wouldn't think she belonged. But Margaret wasn't most people. She didn't care about appearances. She had made up her mind. Traffic zoomed past her as she crossed carefully, gripping her leather handbag, aged, but still sturdy. Her shoes were scuffed from years of wear, and the hem of her dress was slightly frayed. She didn't care about fashion, but she had made sure to be clean and presentable. She had raised her son to believe that dignity wasn't in how much money you had, but in how you carried yourself. She stepped inside, the glass door whispering shut behind her. The warmth of the room wrapped around her, replacing the morning chill. The air smelled faintly of fresh coffee, leather, and polish. She paused near the front, scanning the rows of sleek, expensive vehicles. There was one in particular her son had mentioned loving since he was a teenager. A Rolls-Royce Phantom. He used to cut pictures out of magazines and tape them to the wall, saying, "One day, Mama. One day, you'll ride in that." 3 employees stood near the espresso machine in the corner, their suits sharp and faces smooth with practiced smiles. One of them, a man with slick back hair and shiny cufflinks, glanced at Margaret. His smile faltered. "Can I help you?" he asked, in a tone that wasn't warm. Margaret nodded. "Yes, I'm here to look at one of your cars." He arched a brow, clearly amused. "Oh? You looking for someone, or?" "I'm interested in the Rolls-Royce Phantom," she said, her voice soft but steady. The man blinked, then chuckled under his breath. He turned slightly, casting a look at his coworker, a younger man behind the front desk, who snorted. "You know that's over $400,000, right?" The younger man said. "I know," she replied. The first man approached her now, tilting his head, as if trying to decide if she was joking. His eyes swept over her, her sensible shoes, the thick knit shawl, the plain black dress, and her worn purse. He wasn't subtle. "Ma'am, we usually show our cars to serious buyers," he said, hands clasped in front of him. Margaret tilted her head gently, confused. "And I'm not serious?" He offered a tight smile. "Do you have an appointment? Or perhaps a financial advisor with you?" "I came on my own," she said. "But I know what I'm here for." A third employee, a woman in a navy blazer, lingered a few feet away. She didn't laugh. But she didn't step in, either. "Well," the man said, clearly uncomfortable now, "we don't let people just touch the vehicles. Not unless there's a legitimate reason to believe there'll be a purchase. These cars are delicate, you understand." Margaret's hand had drifted to the chrome trim of a sleek white Phantom. She retracted it. "I didn't mean to offend," she said. "I only wanted to ask a few questions." Garrett, the man's name, according to the nameplate on his chest, sighed as if her presence were a burden. "You might find something more in your range across the street. They've got Toyotas, Hondas, some of them even certified pre-owned. Very reliable." Margaret held his gaze, something about her expression making him pause. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. She simply nodded. "I see," she said, her voice thick with quiet understanding. "I won't trouble you further." She turned to leave, her steps slow and deliberate. The woman in the blazer bit her lip but still said nothing. The 2 men snickered once she passed through the doors. "Honestly," the younger one said, "where do these people get the nerve?" Garrett laughed. "Probably just cold and looking for free coffee." She was dead serious about the Rolls, the younger one smirked. Garrett leaned against the counter. "Maybe she dreams big. Everyone's got fantasies, right?" Behind them, the woman in the blazer glanced toward the door one last time before shaking her head. "I don't know," she murmured, something about her didn't feel like fantasy. She was too sure of herself. "Please," Garrett scoffed. She probably walked here. In fact, she hadn't. But even if she had, that wouldn't have changed a thing. Margaret waited until she reached the sidewalk before she allowed herself to exhale. She didn't look angry. She looked tired, not from age, but from knowing all too well how easily people saw the surface and made their assumptions. It wasn't the first time. She had learned, long ago, that respect in this world was handed out selectively. But today it stung. Not because of the laughter. Not because of the stares. But because she had walked in thinking it would be different. That maybe, just maybe, her dignity and intent would be seen. That someone might speak to her like a person, not a problem. She reached the bus stop and sat down quietly on the bench, her handbag on her lap. For a moment, she stared into the distance. Then she reached for her phone. There were only 2 names saved in it. One of them was her son's. She tapped his name, and when he answered, her voice was calm. "Hey, baby. I went to the dealership this morning." There was a pause on the other end. "They were less than kind," she said gently. Another pause. And then, "Say no more, Mama. I'll take care of it." Margaret nodded, even though he couldn't see her. "You always do." She hung up and leaned back against the bench, the cold wind brushing her face. She didn't want revenge. She didn't need apologies. But what she did want, more than anything, was for her son to know she had tried. That she had stood there proudly, even when others tried to make her feel small. Tomorrow, the world would see her differently. But she would still be the same woman who walked in with a purpose and left with her head held high. Margaret was no stranger to hardship. Long before she ever stepped into a luxury dealership, she had stood in longer lines, grocery stores with only enough for the essentials, bus stops in the freezing rain, hospitals waiting for test results she prayed would come back clear. She had never asked for much, only what was necessary. But she gave everything she had to one person, her son. She remembered the night he was born, alone in a dim hospital room, the father already long gone. She cradled him, swaddled in borrowed blankets, and whispered promises into his tiny ears. He would never have to fight the battles she did. He would know safety, possibility, and dignity. Even if it meant she went without, he wouldn't. That vow shaped her life. Every day was a choice between what she needed and what her son needed more. New shoes for her? No, he had outgrown his again. A warm winter coat for her? Not when his schoolbooks had to be paid for. A better apartment? Maybe later, after tuition was covered. She worked 3 jobs at one point. Mornings at a diner, afternoons cleaning offices, nights sewing alterations from a corner of their 1-bedroom apartment. When others slept, she mended, clothes, furniture, her own tired spirit. She did it all quietly. Without complaint. Because raising him wasn't a burden. It was her life's honor. He was bright from the start. Curious, quick-witted, always asking questions. She encouraged it, even when she didn't have the answers. When he was 6, he started reading street signs aloud from the back of the bus. By 9, he was correcting her math. At 12, he promised her that one day, she'd never have to clean anyone's house but her own again. She believed him, not because of the promise, but because of the fire behind it. In high school, he won scholarships. Every award, every certificate, she kept in a small wooden box lined with felt. She'd touch them when she felt low, reminding herself that every missed meal, every aching joint, every time she was overlooked or underestimated, was leading somewhere. College was another mountain. The tuition alone could have bought her a home. But he insisted on working part-time jobs while studying, never letting her take on extra shifts. "You've done enough," he told her one night, his hand over hers. "Let me carry the rest." She still sent him food when she could. Still stuffed his coat pockets with cash when he came home on break. Still called him baby even as he outgrew her hugs. He finished school early. Got into tech. Something with systems, coding, and strategy, languages she didn't speak but trusted fully. He called her after every success. She remembered the day he said, "Ma, I got funding." Real funding. She didn't know what a venture capitalist was, but she clapped anyway, laughed through tears, told him she was proud. And the money followed. Slowly at first, then like a wave. He bought her a modest home before he bought one for himself. Paid off her debts. Made sure she never worked again. She argued, of course, offered to help in his office, maybe answer phones, but he refused. "You already gave me everything," he said. "Let me give you peace." Still, she kept her habits. She reused foil, turned off lights obsessively, clipped coupons, and rode the bus out of choice, not necessity. Money hadn't changed her. It hadn't needed to. Her values were already richer than any bank account. Yet through all his success, her son never put distance between them. No assistant took her calls. No schedule was too packed. When she visited, he made her tea just like she liked it. When she was sick, he flew home without hesitation. No one in his company knew her story, but he did. He never forgot. He once told her, "I built this because you built me." She smiled and wiped his cheek with the same fingers that had scrubbed floors and packed his lunches. He had outgrown everything, poverty, fear, limitation, but never her. When he mentioned the car, it was casual. "You know, I think I might finally get the Phantom." Remember that picture I used to have on my wall? She did. He had carried that dream like a badge. It wasn't about the car, it was about what it represented: overcoming, achieving, reclaiming the right to dream big. I want you to go see it, he said. Tell me what you think before I buy. She hesitated. Me? You, he insisted. Your taste is better than mine. She laughed at that, unsure but honored. She didn't tell him she was nervous. She didn't tell him she feared how they might look at her. She just promised she'd go. She woke early that morning, ironing her best dress, smoothing her hair, tucking a small card with his business logo into her bag, just in case. She told herself she was doing something important, something symbolic. Walking into that dealership wasn't about a car. It was about standing in a space that people like her were rarely welcomed into, and doing so with the quiet power of a mother who had raised a king. What she didn't expect was the dismissal. The assumption. The laughter. She hadn't walked in demanding anything. Just questions. Just courtesy. But they looked through her. They didn't see the woman who had turned hunger into strength, who had taught a boy to believe in his greatness, who had sacrificed every dream of her own to water someone else's. They saw an old woman in thrift store shoes. And that, more than anything, cut deep. She didn't tell her son everything on the phone. She didn't want to worry him. But she knew him well enough to understand what that silence meant after she said the words. They were less than kind. She could almost hear him putting on his jacket, grabbing his keys. Not because he wanted revenge, but because no one disrespects the woman who made him. And that was enough. The world might see her as simple, but the one person who mattered knew she was anything but. Tomorrow, they would see the full truth. And they would remember it. The next morning, just after dawn, the city streets were still quiet. But at the dealership, a subtle tension began to grow. Staff arrived early, sipping coffee, exchanging whispers about a mysterious call they had received. The man who had dismissed Margaret the day before paced near the entrance, trying to keep his composure. The memory of the woman's quiet dignity clung to his thoughts, making him uneasy. At precisely 9 o'clock, the glass doors opened again, not with the timid step of an unsure customer, but with the confident arrival of a sleek black Rolls-Royce Phantom. It gleamed under the morning sun, the kind of car that stopped conversations in their tracks and commanded respect. The engine purred like a lion awakening. A tall, sharply dressed man stepped out, clean-cut, poised, and unmistakably wealthy. His presence alone shifted the energy in the room. The employees straightened, their casual airs replaced by forced smiles and hurried greetings. The man's eyes scanned the showroom floor and then settled on Garrett, the same man who had spoken down to Margaret yesterday. "I'm here for the woman you kicked out," he said, voice calm but authoritative. Garrett swallowed hard. "Sir, I'm not sure what you mean." The man's gaze sharpened. "Margaret. My mother. I hear she was treated poorly here yesterday." Garrett's confident smile faded. "There must be some mistake. We always treat customers with respect." "Do you?" The man's voice dropped. "Because what I heard is very different." Other employees now gathered around, sensing the unfolding confrontation. The woman who had quietly watched the previous day remained silent, her eyes fixed on the billionaire. The man continued. "I want to see the Rolls-Royce Phantom, the one she was interested in." Garrett nodded quickly, leading the way with less swagger than before. The car was immaculate, polished to perfection, every detail flawless. The billionaire circled it slowly, his gaze never leaving the staff behind him. "This is the car," he said. "The one she admired." Garrett shifted uncomfortably. "Yes, sir. It's a fine vehicle." "Good," the man said, his tone firm. "I'm buying it." The room fell silent. This was no ordinary purchase. This was a message. "And I want one thing," he added, eyes locking with Garrett's. "None of your salespeople receive a commission on this sale." Garrett blinked, startled. "That's highly unusual, sir." The man's face was unreadable. "It's very usual for me. No one here should profit from treating my mother like she was yesterday." A murmur passed through the room. Some employees exchanged glances. The woman in the blazer finally spoke softly. "Sir, may I say something?" The billionaire nodded. "This is not how we usually operate, but I think she deserves respect. It was wrong how she was treated." The man smiled faintly. "I'm glad someone sees that." He pulled out a checkbook, signed the papers, and handed the documents to Garrett. The dealership manager took them with shaking hands. "You will call her," the billionaire said. "Invite her here. She will decide if she wants the car." With that, he turned and strode out, leaving a stunned room in his wake. Garrett watched him leave, heart pounding. The man's words echoed loud and clear. The lesson was unavoidable: respect is not optional. Later that afternoon, a call came through. The voice was familiar, gentle, unassuming, yet carrying the weight of quiet strength. "Yes, this is Margaret," she said. The staff listened as she accepted the invitation, her tone polite, measured. When she arrived, the entire dealership was transformed, not just by the presence of the car, but by the way the staff greeted her with sincere apologies and warm smiles. No laughter. No judgment. She walked to the Phantom, touched its smooth surface, and then looked around the room. The once dismissive eyes now held something new: respect. She looked back toward the place where her son had stood, a proud smile softening her face. This was not about the car. It was about something far greater, about dignity restored, and the power of seeing people for who they truly are. The day that followed marked a shift that no one at the dealership could ignore. Margaret's quiet presence, accompanied by the unmistakable aura of her son's success, challenged every assumption they had held. It was as if a mirror had been held up, forcing them to confront their own prejudices and the consequences of their actions. Margaret walked slowly around the showroom, her fingers lightly brushing the luxurious surfaces, absorbing the difference between this world and the one she had always inhabited. The opulence was foreign, yet she moved through it with the grace of someone who had endured far more than material wealth could measure. Every smile she received was a quiet victory. Her son watched from a distance, proud yet humble. The Rolls-Royce was not just a car, it was a symbol of everything they had overcome together. He saw in her eyes a mixture of surprise and vindication, the kind of satisfaction that comes from proving one's worth without words, only the truth of persistence and love. Employees approached her, some still awkward but most sincerely apologetic. They offered explanations, trying to explain away their earlier judgment, but Margaret didn't need them to speak. Her dignity had already spoken louder than any excuse. She accepted their apologies graciously, never once raising her voice or showing anger. Her strength lay in her quiet resilience, a reminder that true power doesn't demand respect, it commands it. Meanwhile, word spread. Customers who overheard the story began to reconsider their own perceptions. The dealership found itself at a crossroads: continue the old ways of casual dismissal and prejudice, or embrace a new understanding shaped by humility and awareness. The billionaire son made it clear that the purchase was not about flaunting wealth or proving a point to others. It was about honoring the woman who had given everything for him and ensuring that no one would ever belittle her again. In the weeks that followed, changes began to take root. Training sessions on customer respect and sensitivity were introduced. Staff meetings became opportunities for reflection rather than mere logistics. The dealership slowly transformed from a place of exclusivity and judgment into one where every visitor could feel welcome, regardless of their background or appearance. Margaret, once invisible, became a quiet symbol of this transformation. She visited often, not to buy more cars, but to remind everyone of the story behind the glitz. Her presence was a living testament to the dangers of judging by appearances and the power of kindness. Her son, too, remained grounded. He continued to build his company with the same drive and humility that had brought him from hardship to success. But more than that, he became an advocate for dignity, using his platform to share their story and inspire others not to overlook those who might seem simple or different. Together, they rewrote a narrative that had too often been told with cruelty and misunderstanding. They showed that respect is not a privilege reserved for the wealthy or the polished, but a right inherent to every human being. And in that, they found something far more valuable than any car or title: the power to change hearts and minds. Thank you for watching this powerful story that reminds us all: never judge someone by how they look or where they come from. True worth and dignity are deeper than appearances, and sometimes, the most unexpected people hold the greatest strength. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to join our community where we celebrate moments that prove first impressions can be wrong, and kindness always wins. Remember, respect costs nothing but means everything. Until next time, keep your hearts open and your minds free of judgment. See you in the next story.